onto my page. Pull it up. Invite some people in. Let's see. Or allow the people to come in. Let's see. Okay, there we go. All right. Flip it on. Make sure we got sound. Okay, we're good. All right. We got 3 people in the house so far. Paul Castaneda, Delia Flores. Delia says she's going to be tuning in while working out at my apartment fitness center. My way of anchoring and processing many energy levels. Murray Loop, Dina Doucette, Lynn Garden, Stephen Michael Jones is back. And Lana Horan, Kathy Waldowski, Elfie Shantz, Camara Ford's in the house down in Florida, Jim Kincaid, Cricket Holden, Denise Chadwick's back, Diane Richards, Shaz Hargreaves, Lishy Love from down in Florida, Cheryl Coach Romaines. If these shows resonate with you, please share. That's how we stay above the, I see Karen Stars in the house. Robert Hall, Kelly Duran. This is how we stay above the algorithms on Facebook. And evidently, thanks to everybody, we've been doing a good job with it because we're getting more people in, even though they're not getting notifications. Hello, Laws Mitchell, Andrew Dohildo, Aline down in Stavanger. Who else we got here? Merlina Marcon, Susan Curtis, Kelly Duran, Wendy Hall Umstead. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second broadcast today of Soul Speaks 5D. We've got a special show with a brother who's currently in LA, over there in I call the LA West Coast softies.
Oh no, it is. Yeah.
Now I go back to my old career, and I ran a couple of businesses over there, and I was amazed at how everybody worked till 4 and on Fridays left at 12. I was like, what's going on?
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's just the culture. So let me, all right. It's a great place to visit. 33 people in the house. All right. Yvonne's down in Tasmania, Pia in Denmark, Kenton Turner. Happy friend anniversary today. Elizabeth Whitworth. All right. Okay. Now, let me formally roll this out and introduce our distinguished guest, Matthew Mournian. Matthew Aaron Mournian is a multidimensional healer, intuitive empath, and psychic reader specializing in clearing, balancing, and removing negative energetic attachments from the body. His current mission involves assisting with the activation and integration of the multidimensional frequencies that exist within each of us. Matthew's day-to-day energetic practice uses a 3-part protocol of tarot, spirit guide consultation, elements of hypnotherapy, and then direct energetic transmission to release implantation, blockage, and or trauma from the body. As a lifelong ET contactee, former addiction counselor, and mental health professional, his work also extends to those seeking counseling for MyLab, ET abduction, SSP, MAP deprogramming, and survivals of ritual abuse. At this stage of our collective and individual evolution, Matthew's primary focus is on healing and clearing the negative energetic threads that block us from truly knowing ourselves and realizing our life's mission. Whether that be through intuitive consultation, energetic healing, or implant removal, it is in his mission to assist with the empowerment and liberation of mankind on its path of awakening into the magic of our multidimensional existence. Remember, yourmission.com is his link. And any other links, we'll get him to share with us in the comments after the show's over. Welcome to Soul Speaks 5D. Matthew, thank you for sharing space with us and honor us with your presence today.
Hey, thank you, man. It is truly an honor to be here with you. I've been watching you for a while, so yeah, thank you.
Very cool. Thank you for the love and support. And thank you, everybody, for the continued love, support, and contributions that keep us going every single day as we expand this thing more and more each day, until the day we can break into our own independent site. So Matthew, this is quite a resume here. That might not be the right word, but I think this is interesting because you've been a lifelong ET contactee. as well as the psychic part of it, which seems to be pretty diverse as well. You're among friends here. Everybody can relate to, into your story. I think one thing that we haven't gotten into a lot in 800 plus episodes, almost 900 episodes, is we have talked about ETs and have for years in the Soulogy group, abductions and interactions, connections, communications. But yeah, we would definitely want to dive into that for 10 or 15 minutes. But with that diverse background and life experience, the famous question here is, when did you wake up?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I would say for me, it was kind of a gradual process in that I think I was aware early on in my life of some sort of a ET event that was happening with some of the individuals in my immediate family. And as I was growing up, it was very much of kind of a joke or just kind of a funny story. And fast forward many, many years later, after, a number of what I call the maladies of a star seed, which for those of us that identify as, like the star seed or even just an ascending being, we like come into this body with somewhat of an agreement that says we may go through certain trials, tribulations, choices, and things that were made. So for me, it was a long, arduous process of breaking through all kinds of stuff that was going on in my life. And for me, I think the primary awakening event, in almost a stereotypical sense, for me occurred right around the 2012 December timeline shift, in which at that time for me, it was as if there was a great pressure building up in my body. I was working as a mental health counselor at the time, working in addiction, like treatment, and I began to have these incredible, what I thought I was losing my mind at the time. And that was in 2012. And at that stage, I chose to like suppress it. I chose to kind of push it down with the use of certain medications. And, basically, I was on this crash course for like an awakening. And what happened to me was very specific. I am what I would call like a walk-in or a soul braid, in the sense that I had an event, I believe this was in July of 2015, in which I was at a work event working with homeless veterans in my old hometown. And I was walking through this fair and a woman said to me, "Hey, so would you like an energy blessing?" And I was like, yeah, okay. And she literally put her hands on my head and just said a quick prayer. And honestly, within about 30 days, so many things had begun to organically change in my life. I now understand it as a crown chakra opening. And what happened for me in that sense is I think I was able to create enough of an opening in like the container of the previous version of Matthew that allowed this incredible, it was like a Kundalini awakening times 10, lasted for about 3 to 4 months. And as I began to integrate that energy, I started having wild like contact experiences. It was as if a great pressure had been built up within the existential fabric of Matthew. And it took me through this multi-year process. So for me, I would say this awakening thing has been an ongoing process of understanding the multiple levels of the self. And so I would say probably in 2015 was when the greatest surge of whatever that energy came through for me, with I would say 2016 and 17 being the years in which I call, or rather what I call kind of like a liberation from that previous archetype that I was living in. And that culminated for me, just to kind of make an ultra long story really short, right around middle of 2017, I made a decision to leave my marriage, my job, the house I owned, like my career, my stuff, my life. I literally put everything on the curb and I drove away. And I made the choice to enter and transform and to allow the version of me that was starting to come through to completely seed itself in this body and in this timeline. So it's been a crash course. I have not been doing this work for very long. I've been doing it maybe at the most 2.5 years. But in that time, I've noticed incredible, monumental, life-changing shifts, not only myself, but other people that I work with. So I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, man, that was powerful. I love that. That was excellent. I hate to jump right into it, but I'm really, really curious about the level of Star Family ET contact, and also how that changed or transformed after this experience that you described. Somebody made the comment real quick. somebody made a comment. It's amazing how people just show up to help and activate from our meetings in the higher dimensions. And I think that's very true. I think a lot of us can relate to that. And I just want to keep going back to some of these points because so many people that are tuning in are just awakening or getting to a point of awareness now where they're at that point where that you described, where they're faced with making that leap into the unknown and pulling away from our illusionary comfort zone. So I just want to make that point. This is a great subject. So and you mentioned your family. Somebody also mentioned that their experience was they tend to track the same family group cluster to check progress and so on. What was your experience? What was the remark about the family and that type of thing? Was it something that was known within your family? And what was your?
It was kind of a joke, to be quite honest. My mother's father, the maternal grandfather, worked in on a base in I can't even say the word, New Mexico during the 70s and I believe at the end of the 60s. He worked in a very low-level place. He was not a scientist. He was not working with any sort of advanced technology, but he was working within, and at least to my understanding now, he was working within an industrial sector on one of these bases. And the story that I was told from him as I was growing up was that when he would drive back to California to visit family, things would happen to him on the road and he would lose time. And as he got older, he talked about space people and spacemen, and it was a big joke. I would say in our family, it was like, yeah, there's he goes, or rather, like there's the stories, and for me, something kind of grabbed on. But I will say it's important to mention that I never, up until 2016 in my life, did I ever see, hear, feel, or even have a dream about an ET. It was something that was blocked from my consciousness, yet I knew it was real. I knew they existed. And so like for me, I was raised in the environment in which that was kind of a joke. It was a thing that was already out. So it was easy for me to understand like later on the things that had been going on in my life. But I don't know if that answers your question, but I think what I have come to understand in the time since through my own work, working with other people, and just kind of understanding my own journey and also looking at Akashic records was that I was subjected early on in my life to some form of genetic alteration, that I came into this realm through some sort of an injection or something that was given to my grandfather. And by my understanding in this particular program, it was a gene that skips a generation. And every other generation, someone in the family would show up with this marker. And there could be a lot more of them in, the group. But, so that was.
No, that's interesting. And the reason I kind of want to jump into this too, and I'm going to go to your post 2015 experiences. The reason I want to go into this is because recently my partner and I have had some we have experiences every day of some sort or another. And so very recently we've had these meetings with our higher aspect teams, basically, that form one team. And we've had some really cool intel come in, which we may talk about eventually. But at the same time, I would describe it like this: on the periphery, there is a very obvious presence that's showing itself that would be described in 3D terms as ET. And very much to me, there seems to be a difference between, for instance, our dimensional contact with our teams and the divine essences that they are. In the ET presence, there seems to be more of a physicality. I remarked to her last night that it seems to me that the ETs that we're sensing and seeing are more part of the movie, and just it's expanding as we're expanding also in consciousness. So that kind of makes sense. The internal expands, the external expands. Mm-hmm. So having said that, what occurred post 2015 in terms of your ET senses and experiences?
That's a really good question. So to be very specific, I was doing, it was like a breath work it was like a breath of fire, sort of like a meditation. It's called Ananda Mandala. It was just kind of like one of like the spiritual like practices that I was using at the time. And I was just doing like a meditation in the afternoon at my house, totally just hanging out one Sunday afternoon. And when I reached the crown chakra, just in this sort of like in-out breath work, right at the end, there was a pop, this pop around me. When I opened my eyes and what I understand to be an astral space, I was face to face with what appeared to be, now that, I look back on it, a mantis being, or like a praying mantis type extraterrestrial that was probably about 7 to 8 feet tall in front of me. In that moment, it was as if I was living it, feeling it, breathing it. I don't know how to describe it other than the most profound sense of love. And it was as if this being was proud of me. It was as if it was happy to see me. There was this beam and this light that came out. And in that moment, it turned into a boy, what I would describe as maybe like an Indian boy, about 17 to 18 years old, almost like he came from a tribe. He had interesting things around his arms, and he like continued to smile at me and beam at me in this way. And poof, and they were gone. And right after that, I was asking for names and all this stuff. And that was the very kind of point when it first showed itself to me. And there was a lot of stuff that happened after that, but I sat on that experience for about 6 months. I didn't tell a single person. I just sat with it. I was like, who was that? What was that? So that was the first time I was ever face to face with what I would call an ET being. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And from what I used to do a lot of research, like a lot of us do. And one of the things that you don't see as much written, at least I haven't, about the mantis species. But one thing you do find is that they are typically described as very highly evolved, almost like spiritual emissaries, and very, very high level. So that's interesting. I want to ask you, just from your perception, your perspective. So when in your mind, and of course there's no right or wrong answer, we're just trying to open up some soul codes and share some activations. When do you think that was an aspect of you, or was it something outside of yourself? Do you think it was an aspect of you?
I believe it was both. And I know that's kind of like a paradoxical answer, but by my understanding, based on like the nature of like the realm that we're like currently existing, that is an absolute like possibility. In the work that I have done since then, I begin to understand that probably like yourself, many of us incarnate into the physical realm with not what we would call one singular element that we would identify as a higher self, but rather a higher self council. And for me, what I've understood that to be was one of the primary members that was most relevant at that stage of whatever I was going through, that held a spot within this primary council, which is essentially versions of us that have existed and do currently exist on another plane. That said, I believe that element or that being is still working with me. I've seen them a couple times since, and there's a bunch of other stuff that happen, but I have not seen the presence of that a particular ET sense. But yeah, I believe it's both me and also outside. So
yeah, in the paradoxical complexity of the universal truth, which is a way of saying, human, don't try to understand it. Just take it in, right? But another thing that I love about that, what you described in that initial meeting, is I know for Morgan and I that the interactions we have with really any essence that again is part of us but appears outside of us, there seems to be a tremendous amount of appreciation and admiration even for the work that we've done. And I got to believe, as the individual goes, so goes the collective, just like in your experience. Now, have you received any intel from any of these encounters in terms of the mission, in terms of what's happening, what's going on with yourself or with the world?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few months after that, I began to have what I now understand to be ongoing telepathic like interfacing with like the primary soul group at that time. And at this stage of my life, I was really I was working with a lot of like meditation, qigong. I would literally stand in my backyard and do like qigong for 3, 4, 5 hours a day. I was in such an awakening period. I was like losing my identity. I didn't understand what I was doing in my job. My wife was totally like confused, and I would just stand out in the yard and like do these exercises because I had no idea what else to do. And what happened was, in that process, somebody started talking to me. And there was this ongoing exchange that occurred and kind of like culminated at one point when I was literally told in my mind, look up. And I looked up into the sky and I saw the face of a lion in the clouds. And that ended up kind of bringing in this interesting series of events in which I was told quite literally, Matthew, you have a mission. It is time for you to remember. And I was given a choice. I was shown this image of me having to let go of many aspects of my life, many elements of myself. And there was quite literally a moment that I have actually like written about and maybe like talked about with other people, where I got down on my hands and knees in my backyard on 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a Saturday, all by myself with tears streaming down my face. And I was given the opportunity through some element of, you know, myself to step into whatever that was. And like, it wasn't as if my old life was so like chaotic and horrible, but it was something that I knew was so dear and needed to my heart. And yet I didn't know what it was. So that was kind of the process. And they've kind of been talking to me ever since in many different forms, not always in like the telepathic way, but that was kind of like one of the moments in which I believe I was literally placed on this mission. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. I call them super deja vu moments. They're like happening to you, but they're happening for the first time, but they're not happening for the first time. And you're like, and it seems too like as time goes on, there is a higher level of comprehension, but there's less and less literal understanding. So it's like, what, you know, and just my wife, two phrases she's taught me that I use all the time. It's I surrender and yes, please.
Oh, I know.
Do you want this? Yes, please. Just, you know, it's a trust thing. But it's interesting too, because, you know, in talking to someone like you about this and who's also a practitioner, how has this gone in respect to your work, to your clientele? Are you hearing these type of stories with them, or are they sensing a star family or having communications with star family?
Absolutely. And I will say it has gone in both positive and also negative directions. In the time since those initial experiences, I began to work with and develop and kind of like hone my own, what I understand to be multi-dimensional frequencies, which is something that's native to each of us, something that we are all able to activate and use. So in the act of kind of like beginning to work with people's energy chakras, the meridians, we begin to understand that within the structure of the physical body are almost like these, it's like a device, a gateway, a seal, a blockage, or an actual element of emotion. And what I'm finding is when we move these, when we extract, when we allow healing or a release, or sometimes quite literally an implantation that's in the body, it opens up layers of consciousness, old memories, partitioned, hidden, blocked memories, covered memories, all of those things. And so what I've noticed in my current work is that people tend to come to me going through some series of events that will like relate to something like that. And as we will begin to work with elements of the energy body, we begin to uncover a myriad of experiences. But right now, what I'm finding is that people are being routinely contacted by something. Now, is that necessarily an extraterrestrial presence? Is that an element of the higher self? Is it something else entirely? I think that's up to you know, each of us to kind of go through the process of you know, understanding what that is. So it's been both like positive and negative, but yes, there is absolutely, by my understanding, a very distinct effort to create an ongoing basis of contact through some form with people here on the surface and the elements of their families, so to speak, that exist outside of our realm. So
yeah, and absolutely. I think too, just to reiterate, as my wife says, I need to say reiterate. Without the Texan accent, is that there with our own consent was a mission, our missions that were agreed upon by us. That memory seems to be surfacing with people as well. and it seems to be growing pretty rapidly. Now, I mean, you're out in LA, 13, 14, 15 million people in that 4 or 5 county area. I'm very familiar with it. I haven't been in a city. I was in New York for a while, but LA is a little bit different because it's like, it's just a faster pace.
Yeah.
What's it like being out there in that concrete jungle, being connected now? And what are you observing out there? Are the masses asleep? Are they, or is there evidence that there's a rapid collective awakening, or somewhere in between?
Yeah, I think everybody can probably agree on some point. It's incredibly evident here in LA that there is, by and large, some sort of a mass great awakening that's occurring for a multitude of people on this planet. Now, I think that said, that awakening process and the unfoldment of what is ultimately in the 3D experiential level, what is actually the fourth, it's like a fourth density frequency that's activating within each of us that ends up being one of the primary elements that can start the awakening process. It's as if our consciousness kind of rises a bit, we break through the seal, and it begins an unfoldment. Now, what I'm noticing in Los Angeles, and I think everyone's seeing this, is that tends to go one of two ways with people at the moment. And sure, there's like a variance in that huge, like a bell curve, but I'm noticing an incredible, it's like a polarization of like energy, in the sense that it's very assaulting, it's very toxic, it is highly polarized and intense here, yet at the same time there is this growing underbelly of awareness, of understanding, of people that are coming into like a greater purpose. So I would say at this time it's heavily weighted on the side of toxicity, of like negative frequencies. The victimizer mindset is incredibly strong here, but it is awakening, it is arising. So we're seeing a little bit of both, I guess we could say.
Yeah. Some people have referred to that for the last few months or even years as the Great Divide. The chasm. The truth is the truth, and anything that's not pure love, truth, is going to be at the other end of the spectrum with nothing in between. So it's interesting to take different perspectives from around the world. So the big cities we don't get to really examine too much, in LA in particular, because it's been progressive. And I've been out there, and everybody's an intuitive, and everybody's enlightened, and and it's like two different. Well, there's two different ones there. One's very plastic, and one's very real. Yeah. So now, in terms of your threefold practice, I mean, is this something you developed on your own? I mean, just through your communion with infinite intelligence? And can you tell us about how you operate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I will actually, first off, I have had an incredible amount of help, primarily on the physical realms when it comes to, or from the physical realm, when it comes to learning tarot, learning energy reading, learning certain processes, understanding chakras, the meridians, elements of our own energy, and the ways in which our emotions will interact with those. I have had some instruction, some teaching, and I have had some key initiations in that area, but I will admit that by and large, when I was able to open myself up to what I understand is an ongoing interchange in between, the multiple versions of that higher self council, a lot of the work that I'm doing right now is on a completely intuitive basis. Yeah. So that said, I believe I'm straddling kind of this interesting fence in between those two worlds. And I think that's also one of the reasons why my work is taking such an interesting turn at the moment. We're really finding that we're able to open up fabric, overlays, elements, these templates that will exist inside us that really lead to incredible change. But at this time, I would say it's a combination of many things, with the first being, I always start out a reading or a session with a little bit of like a question answer session. It's almost like a greeting or an invocation of the higher self, the aspects of the higher self that are working with the client, our spiritual team. So we'll do a little bit of a reading in the beginning. I'll use some tarot. We'll just do like a direct energy reading just to see what comes up. I offer people a chance to ask questions because we have, as I'm sure you're aware, this incredible ability to like connect with those realms. It exists in each of us. And when we do this with intention, with like willingness, with openness, and with a pure heart, It allows us to extract and gain incredible amounts of information about our timelines, our energetic condition, emotion, etc. So we start out with a quick reading in the beginning, and then we take that information directly into what I call the hypnotic induction. I worked with hypnotherapy for a while, and what I ended up doing was taking some of the elements of that and basically creating an energetic, sort of like a capsule in which, myself and the client will kind of go down into the theta state. And what I find is when we use elements of like theta, or even just dropping down in our awareness on just a small level, elements of you kind of, go to sleep, and everything that's not you, or elements that are not native to your current energetic environment, tend to bob up on the surface of the energy body, kind of like a buoy, the way oil will rise to the top of the jar, things will kind of, gather along the sides. So what I understand is that we're able to use a frequency of our own chi, a highly concentrated beam of sound and light, which we are then creating and using within our own body, and we're moving that frequency through the body wherever it is, releasing the blockage, releasing implantation. So it's kind of a 3-part protocol of reading, hypnotherapy, and then directly moving the energy through the body. And what I find is when we approach energy work from that perspective, or what I would call an integrated approach of using all of our senses, it allows a much greater opening within the templates of the body, and that is what ultimately allows us to bring in really, really great change. So I might have just rambled a lot there.
No. You don't need to apologize for anything. This is perfect. This is the way it should roll. So now, in terms of what you're observing, you've been doing this 2.5 years in earnest, you said, and what have you observed in the collective energy of your clientele? Are you seeing people becoming more empowered, learning to heal themselves, getting it, so to speak, clicking or whatever? Is it increasing? Is it what does it look like?
Oh, it's absolutely increasing. What I'm getting to watch on a first-hand basis, literally every day, because this is my absolute primary mission at this time. I'm getting to watch the unfoldment, the awakening, and the activation of elements of people that have been long dormant, that have been sitting inside themselves, people that have been drifting through this physical incarnation, wondering who they are, why they came here, what they're supposed to do, what's blocking them. How do I get past this stage of my life? Why am I even here? We're getting to watch those lights turn on. And what's happening in that process is that I'm beginning to see those abilities are coming online for people, that intuition, the ability to bring on self-healing, the ability to activate that scalar native frequency that comes out of each of us that can literally cure anything that occurs in this realm. Those abilities are within each of us. So what I'm finding is that in the work that I'm doing, it's a lot less about, healing or removing whatever that is. It's more about opening that door so that you can then learn to do that, for yourself. Yeah. So I'm just kind of opening that door, I guess you could say. So
yeah, absolutely. You're facilitating it. Yeah. Unlike in the old paradigm, the yogi or the guru would, or practitioner would have a client that would come back week after week after week after week after week, which is really disempowering. And I think that's fading away. There's nothing wrong with that. It got us to where we needed to get. Now, I had a question formulated about the clients. No, I can't remember what it was now. That's just the way it goes. Right? But again, back to the whole thing with, in your experience. Now, a lot of people look at someone like you and rightfully so, and say, wow, he's got it together. He's done the work and so on and so on. Do you get hit? Do you get knocked off your square? Do you get hit with energies and sometimes our people are triggered and stuff like that? And if so, how do you get through that on a personal level?
Oh, absolutely. I would say learning to understand the difference between my energy, other people's, and the ways in which that kind of interacts within the body has been one of the most valuable understandings that I am still working with in this life. And for me, I came into this realm, as a teenager, incredibly addicted, very, very traumatized from a very, very dark place. And what I discovered over the years of kind of working through those of my own issues, what I began to see and kind of understand was that they took different forms later on in my life. And as I've done certain like spiritual work and broken through like certain layers and like whatever I've been doing, it tends to manifest now in more emotionally based, different scenarios. I'm still working with so much of, my own stuff. And I think, we all are. So yes, it's an absolutely ongoing process. And I think for me, like the self-work, and I think probably everyone will say this as like a practitioner, the self-work is absolutely the most important part of this, because if there's anything that I've learned in this journey so far, it is that we cannot transmit something that we do not have. You can open the door for people, but you cannot bring a person to a vibratory state unless you yourself hold the capability of entering into that frequency. So I have had an ongoing series of many attacks over the past couple of years. And what I understand is that was an assignment that I took on. It was an agreement that I made. And I've always been one of those people that said I was willing to see and experience both the darkest of the dark and the brightest of light. And so it's an ongoing process, man. It's a battle. Staying like clear in this realm and in this timeline, it's an ongoing thing. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah. We must have come from the same branch of the tree of life, because I hit the extremes as well. But and I agree with what you're saying. What you're saying is that the healer can only take the client or whoever to the level that they've healed themselves, basically. Right. I mean, I
would agree to that. And yet I think honestly, everyone probably on the show that has, like worked or experienced that realm has also experienced an anomaly, in that there will invariably be an individual, regardless of their like condition or whatever stage they're in, that may need to be a messenger, a healer, or will be able to pass on something. So I don't call that a hard and fast rule, but I can say from my own experience. Certainly.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. It's no different than that lady doing that crown chakra opening.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I know early in my journey, I had, just a whole array of psychics that would contact me and say, "I've got a message for you," and I knew intuitively. I thought, well, that's and it was like the yellow brick road. So yeah, you're right about that. There is that element that we can't really wrap our arms around. I'm curious, and I don't usually get into this stuff, but I think with your experience, I think it would be interesting. I don't usually get into this type of thing because I don't really feel like we need to focus on it, but I do think it's important to discuss things because it does expand our awareness and our open-mindedness. Because a lot of times we're saying, "Oh, I'm open-minded to all the light," but I'm not open-minded to the other side of the coin. Like it stops here and it doesn't go any further because there's a boogeyman behind that big door of fear. But so with there's a lot of focus, or enough focus, even in the light worker circles, on the external. Like the external is going to save our ass or something. Like and I'm not political or anything, but whether it be Trump or whether it be the white hats behind the NSA or whatever, or Q. Or whatever it is, or our financial reset, which we've been hearing about for years, Nasara. I mean, come on, I've got my own opinions about it, but I'm just wondering from your perspective and your experience, and being that you're in LA, how much, what am I trying to say? Controlled opposition propaganda is out there, and how effective do you think it is on, in particular, those who you might call awakened starseeds? How much of a factor is it?
Wow. Well, damn, that's a very good question. I think it's absolutely a factor. And I would say the level to which varies greatly depending on whatever stage you're in, wherever you're at, whatever, kind of like your highest level of spiritual and energetic discernment is at the moment. And I might even be losing the essence of that question as I'm thinking about it. Could you, maybe like rephrase that or kind of like repeat that?
I mean, there seems to be enough focus on the external still, still people looking at, hey, and I see prominent people doing it. Hey, Trump stepping in, Q's in alignment, the white hats have, and I'm not saying that none of this hasn't happened or has happened. Right. But if I look at the guts of it, if I look at the raw material that's out there, we look at everything from the story of the Nephilim, the story of the esoteric knowledge being held, the 1%, the monarchy, the Vatican. I mean, my attitude is if somebody was really awake, they jump up on the highest pedestal, unafraid of physical death, 100% locked into their divinity, and say, hey, there's a bunch of bullshit going on over at the Vatican. They're doing this, or over here at the monarchy, they're doing that. Let's change it now. We don't need to change slowly. We don't need to disclose slowly because you humans can't handle it. We're the 99.99%, and we are representing maybe a minority in these awakened star seeds, but the facts are the facts. We are the power, and I just sit here and wonder, how long are we going to give this power up, and when is somebody going to stand up on the world stage? And if they haven't done it, then why would we think it's going to change? I don't know. It's just something that's kind of been rubbing me a certain way, and I guess. My higher aspect, or one of them, is sticking a pitchfork in me, but telling me to say something about it. I don't know. It threw me off too. I got off on a tangent.
That's all good. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean,
I would say if there was anything that I picked up early on, and at the time it was said, at the time that it was said to me, I really didn't understand what it was. But a woman told me very early on in this journey, she said, once you understand who and what you truly are, there is nothing in this world that will be able to stop you from fulfilling who and what you came here to do. And I took that as knowledge of self, at least for me, was the primary focus of that stage of my existence. So when I look at like the chaos and the noise, the things that are happening around the world, we're constantly assaulted. We're literally living in a realm in which we are given weaponized food. We are hit by literal frequencies from our devices 24 hours a day. We have nothing but misinformation, victimizer mindsets, literal energetic grids, et cetera, that are placed around us to distract us, pull us away, alter some element of our emotional and electrochemical elements of our body, and create a distraction, like a reliance on anything in the self. So yeah, man, it's an ongoing process for each of us.
I appreciate you engaging me with this, because here's the thing. I'm with you. I'm with the lady. I know who I am, what I am, and what I'm a part of, and I'm not afraid to die, because there is no death. So 5G, GMO, fluoride, chemtrails, that doesn't mean anything to me, because I am everything. I can alchemize and integrate with everything, and it just kind of amazes me. And I guess maybe I'll admit, maybe I'm in judgment. Maybe there's something in myself I need to look at. But I find it a little bit aggravating that people of what I would consider a high vibration are stuck in that, what you and somebody else just referred to as a distraction, because to me, that's what it is. We've been the dog chasing our tail for so long, and now we figured out that it was us all along. Let's run with that. Let's run with that. I just feel like that, even with the somewhat muted, what do you call it? Suppressing. You see people getting shut down. That might be propaganda, like Alex Jones or the Joe Rogans or the David Ikes, who just got banned out of Australia. I mean, the bottom line is there's a big enough pulpit with the internet that somebody or some bodies could get out there and start saying, hey, you know what? I'm calling bullshit on this. If somebody really had the balls, they would say what the truth is. I just don't see it. And therefore, I don't want to be distracted by it. I'm just sitting here in this chair watching many people of high vibration still stuck on it. And I'm wondering why. I don't know.
I think that's part of that agreement that we make, like when we agree to incarnate as humans. And I think for you and I, it's a whole different process at this stage, because you are aware of that mission that you are on. You are aware of that version of Todd that is here on this timeline, actively working in his own ascension. So for some of us, a lot of the noise and that, all of that stuff is already fallen away, or it will like continue to in varying elements along the way. I know that for me at this stage, part of the mission that I'm on is helping to awaken and assist with those people that are still assaulted or caught up or just still
Yeah.
kind of like running around in like whatever that game is. So, you know, as we like pop our heads up, we will invariably come to that place in which we see it for what it is. So in my opinion, it's already happening on a daily basis, but
Yeah.
it's a process.
And I guess it goes without saying, based on what you said earlier, that the ability to transform or to become aware, process / transform, alchemize, convert, transmute, whatever, for individual souls here on the earth in the physical is moving faster and faster and faster. I mean, what may have taken me 6 months or 2 years might take somebody 10 days now. I mean, are you discovering that in your practice? Are people able to pull this stuff in and transform it quicker and understand it?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's probably one of the coolest things that we're seeing right now, especially with respect to the way time is passing, with the way things are occurring within this pocket of time that we once described as a year or a month. What I'm seeing now is that we can accomplish or will experience the same amount of experiential, whatever it is, within that pocket of time. And it's as if much more has happened. And so what I believe that is the liquid sentient nature or the fabric of time evolving and changing. We've all seen the way it shifted. So yes, things can happen instantaneously. And I know you're aware of this. You've had other people talking about this, the shift into 4D and 5D and the ways in which in the physical shell and the physical body we're experiencing right now primarily fourth density frequencies. Our consciousness exists in the 5D realms already, which we're totally aware of, but for the vast majority of us here on the physical plane, we're experiencing the fourth density shift in the physical body first. So even though our consciousness is there, we have to go through this integration process. And so one of the things that we're seeing with respect to instant healing or this instant like manifestation or whatever that blockage, the changes that can occur within us, even if it's learning or like a realization, those things are happening instantly now. But that is also dependent upon certain factors, our own internal condition, our energetic state, our levels of our ability to understand what's happening. And also, I would say our willingness to deal with our traumas, to really look at the darker aspects of ourselves and do that shadow work. That's what, in my opinion, are just some of the things that open the door to that healing. So I hope that answers you.
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, I think in our hearts, we all want to change the world for the better. I mean, I really do. I really believe we may be out of touch with something that benevolent, within ourselves because of our own lack of self-love. But the fact is, if you want to change the world, change yourself, period.
Yeah.
And it's like when, and I know this stuff sounds cliche and it sounds new age, but these things are, we can only expect that as we expand internally, our ability to handle a wider expanse externally, the movie broadens as well, and the extremes become further apart. So, I mean, I'm excited about it, and I love having a conversation like this. I'm enjoying this very much. You've got a great perspective. Let me ask you, if you had somebody, or when you have somebody, because a lot of practitioners, and I've talked about this recently since the first of the year, a lot of this practitioners have said that since the first of the year or thereabouts, they've had many people coming to them that are just freshly awakened, and they don't really understand what's happening to them. If and when you come across someone like that, what advice do you give them? What guidance and direction do you give them?
Oh, that's a very good question. Very specific, actually. I would say, first off, some of the things that we can do in order to allow and integrate with those energy sources or whatever the realizations, whatever's happening in our current realm, on a physical level, one of the first things we can do is begin to reduce the amount of heavy metal resonance that exists within our bodies. Right now, we're dealing with an incredible amount of weaponized food, environmental things, chemtrails, all of those things. Regardless of what we know or we think we know about it, at this time right now, a lot of the consciousness frequencies, elements of the multidimensional self that are awakening with this within us are being held back and kind of bogged down by this density of heavy metals in the body. So one of the first things I tell people to do is bring down, chelate, detox yourself. That's the first thing. Number two, and along with like the heavy metal process, we deal with our traumas. We begin to understand and work with the shadow aspects. In my opinion, those are the two primary aspects that we can begin working with immediately that can allow us to integrate, allow us to come to a greater understanding of what's happening. Along with that, there's a lot of other stuff, but I would say those are some of the first two areas that we look at, because I find that as we open up to other elements of ourselves, it'll be directly held back behind elements of trauma, pain, or shadow aspects, or sometimes implantation that will exist in the body. So we start by purifying and then breaking down and working our way through the templates. And I don't know if that was an overly dense way of answering that, but
no, that was good. That was good. Let me ask you this: how would you recommend somebody to detox?
Oh, yes, very specific. I can tell you that I take a mixture of several things, and some of these will work for some people, some of these won't. There are specific supplements that we can take, such as silica, diatomaceous earth. We can take what I believe is called nascent iodine with kelp. We can take fulvic acid, FULVIC. Just those alone can assist the body with, especially the brain and areas around the side of our head, specifically known as the sphenoids of the temporal bones and the occipital bone in the back of our head, are kind of like antennas. And as our body kind of works through the energies that we're dealing with, we hold on to resonance of chemicals, resonance of emotion, and especially the heavy metal stuff here. So we begin to detox the body from that. And that's when we kind of jump into everything after that. But yeah, I would say fulvic acid, silica, magnesium, iodine. There's probably a bunch of others that I might be.
That's interesting you say that, because over this last very eventful, elevating week, I've had this almost a pain, a pressure and a pain from the inside out in those areas that you just described. That's the first time I've ever heard anything like that. Let me ask you this. So if a person is going to cleanse, the toxicity, clean up, what's more powerful, in your opinion, the intention behind the actions or the actions themselves?
Yes, I would say, in understanding just like what I know about the nature of energy and even magic, we could say the most powerful force I think that you can bring into that equation is your intention. So in my opinion, that's the most important thing. But that said, like the tools that we use to bring about that intended state can sometimes be not optimal, or it could possibly be the wrong thing. In my opinion, at this point, it's really more about the intention of that process, because there's a lot of other ways to bring down the heavy metals or like to detox the body. It's not always about, like taking a specific thing. There's other energetic practices that we can do. But I don't know if that answers your question, but
you answered the question, and you answered the question before that in the way that you would do it. And you're right. There are many paths, and I think that's another thing that you're starting to see in the practitioner and lightworker circles, is that they are starting to expand a little bit and not be so rigid in it's my way or the highway. Well, I got news for you. It's a soul highway and everybody's on it. So, there's many ways to navigate this thing. Yeah. Right. Very cool. Very cool. So I would ask, before we run out of time, as we approach the incredible synchronicity of 5:55 in New York, I always have that New York time on my computer. How can people get in touch with you? What type of offerings do you have in terms of assistance and facilitating, and anything else you might want to put out there on the Soulogy Network?
Yeah, thank you. So right now I work through my website, rememberyourmission.com. If you want to book a private session with me, primarily at this time, a lot of what people have been coming to me for has been tarot and spirit guide like consultations, in which we'll kind of like delve into your timeline, look at aspects of what's going on with you, look at your energy. That's one of the primary things that I do. And then along with that, we have the clearing process and, various versions of that. So I do one-on-one work with literally people all over the world at this point. It's entirely done online, either through Zoom or Messenger or by phone. So people can reach out to me through the website and book a session there. I also do group clearings. I literally just did one yesterday. We did a workshop and like a group, sort of like a meditation and clearing on specifically working with those elements of the bones on the side of the head. And just to let you know, Todd, that's probably, and this may sound crazy, the gallbladder a meridian that runs along the side of your head right here. And what happens with that specifically is it's kind of like a running loop of thought, emotion, data. When we're in a constant interchange with people in this world energetically, energy comes in on the sides right here at these sphenoid plates, which is the gallbladder like connection, and it routes it through your body, runs it over and over and over again. So you can breathe through, you can massage, you can move energy through here and literally pull that frequency out. It's one of the things that can absolutely bring down the intensity of the emotional volume or that charge inside your head. So keep that in mind. That said, I do group energy work. We did one yesterday, and at the end of March, I have a multidimensional tarot class coming up. It's a 2-week thing where we're meeting once one week and then once on the following week. And that's going to be going through helping people open up chakras, the meridians, or rather understanding how to diagnose and understand elements of their own energy through the lens of the tarot. So it's one of the primary tools that I use for helping us understand energy. And I think it's very helpful for people because it gives them a visual perspective. It gives you an image, to work with. So I do classes like that, ongoing individual work. But yeah, you guys can reach me through on my website. So yeah, rememberyourmission.com. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. You're very welcome. So the website is at the bottom of the post at the top of above the video. And I'd love to collaborate with you again. I really would. I think we could jump into a lot of different subjects. So I'm sure Morgan or I will reach out and get you back on here so we can expand awareness of your work and your message and your frequency, because that's what we do here. It's just one big solo soup, right? It's a pleasure. Definitely. It's been a pleasure meeting you, and I send all blessings to you and yours. And thank you, everybody. We'll be back in another hour with the third of 4 shows.
Awesome.
You take care. Thank you very much, man. All right. See you later.
Yeah, thank you.